Let's share screen. Here we go. Let's see this one. Okay, you should be able to see the PDF with this little yellow block. And up here at the top, we have A.T. Jones appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court decision making this a Christian nation. Can everybody see that?
Yes,
Got it.
that's good.
Awesome. Okay. And let me see if I can get my chat open in case anybody has any questions. Okay. I've finally figured out how to do that to present and look at the chat at the same time. Okay. All right. So we left off right here, but it's always like I mentioned, it's hard coming in from, this is I think this is our fourth or fifth presentation on this this document because it's 88 pages long. We're now on 59, page 59. So instead of starting right here, let's just go up a little bit and remind us where we left off. And it's kind of, let's start around right here. So the theologians, and is this big enough for everybody? Does anybody need it bigger?
I'm good.
Okay. All right. So if you have any questions or comments or need it bigger or anything, if you can't hear me, just holler or type it up in the chat. Okay, so the theologians gave to the Sabbath commandment a construction which was not in any sense warranted by the intention of the author of the commandment. They then went to Congress and demanded with threats that it allow itself to be influenced by these theological sentiments and political threats to give to the written constitution of the government of the living God a construction which is not in arty sense warranted by the intention of the founder of the Constitution. And our national legislature did allow this sentiment to influence it into doing that very thing. Such a thing done to a human constitution, an earthly statute, being justly chargeable to reckless disregard of official oath and public duty, what must be chargeable against such an action with reverence to the divine constitution and the heavenly law. The national legislature, the Congress of the United States, has allowed the churches to draw it into the commission of an act with reference to the Constitution and laws of the living God, which, if done only with the laws of men, would be reckless disregard of official oath and public duty, and both Congress and the churches are without excuse in the doing of it. By this legislation, at the dictate of the churches, Congress has distinctly and definitely put itself and the government of the United States into the place where it has established and proposes to enforce the observance of an institution as sacred and is due to the Lord, which not only the Lord has neither established nor required, but which is directly contrary to the plain word of the Lord upon the subject of this very institution and its observance as due to the Lord. And in the doing of this, Congress has also been caused to assume to itself the prerogative of authoritative interpreter of Scripture for the people of the land and for all who come into the land, and puts itself in the place of God by authoritatively deciding that an observance established and required by the state, and which it calls the Lord's, is the Lord's indeed, although the Lord plainly declares the contrary. Okay, so that catches us up. Do we have any questions or comments thus far?
So the Congress is interpreting the Bible for the people.
Exactly. And not only is he interpreting the Bible, they are doing it contrary to what the Lord says. Very bad. Okay, any other questions, comments? Okay. In thus submitting to the dictates of the churches and making itself the official and authoritative mouthpiece for the theological definitions and interpretations of the divine law, the Congress of the United States has given over the government of the United States into the hands of the combined churches. A forcible American writer has long ago stated the principles thus: to permit a church, any church, to dictate beforehand what laws should or should not be passed would be to deprive the people of all the authority they have retained in their own hands, and to make such church the governing power instead of them. So basically putting the church in charge instead of the people.
Mhm.
This is precisely what has been done before the eyes of the people of the United States in this Sunday legislation of the 52nd Congress. The combined evangelical churches, including the Catholic Church, as a united body on this question, did dictate under threats that this law should be passed. Congress did permit it and did yield to the dictation, and in so doing, it did deprive the people of the government authority which they had retained in their own hands by the Declaration and the Constitution, and did make the churches the governing power in the government instead of the people. Government of the people, by the people, and for the people is gone, and there has been established in its stead the subjugation of the people by the churches and for the churches. This is the Congress of the United States. The Congress of the United States has been led by the churches to do, and in doing of it, it has caused this enlightened nation, the example and glory of the world, to assume the place and the prerogatives of the governments of the Middle Ages in enforcing the dogmas and the definitions of the theologians, and in executing the arbitrary and despotic will of the church. Not only has the Congress done this, but it has openly confessed to the churches that it has done so, and that it did not dare to do otherwise. Anybody with half the average amount of sense about him ought to have known enough not to openly confess it to the churches, even though it were so. But since this abject confession is so gravely made, is it any wonder that the churches, realizing their power, should at once boast of it and begin to use it? This is just what they are doing. The chaplain of the United States Senate, J.G. Butler, D.D., wrote in the New York Independent, July 28, 1892, as follows: "Say not that the former days were better than these, for the Congress of the United States never numbered abler, truer, nobler men than fill the chamber today, and never more surely than now would avowed hostility to God, his day and word and house and kingdom, remand a public servant to private life. It is evident, therefore, that henceforth religious tests are to be made a qualification for office under the government of the United States." Okay, so I have to ask, I don't know, I don't understand that paragraph. I don't,
Yeah, let me read it again.
yeah.
He's the chaplain of the United States. Say not that the former days were better than these. Talk about the middle. Was he talking about the Middle Ages? Was that before? Say not that the former days were better than these. For the Congress of the United States never numbered abler, truer, nobler men than fill the chambers today. He's commending the Congress for what they've done. And
Oh,
ever more surely than now would avowed hostility to God, his day and word and house and kingdom, remand a public servant to private life. That sentence kind of, I struggle with that sentence, but I know the gist of what he's saying here is that he's commending Congress on what they did.
Okay.
Calling
Okay.
them, never before has Congress had more abler, truer, nobler men than what fills the chamber today. And if you look at what they just did,
Hmm.
what we're just reading that they did, then he's commending them on that.
Okay. Great.
Never more surely than now would avowed hostility to God, his day and, his day, Sunday, that they're calling Sunday, and word, and house, and kingdom, remand a public servant to private life. Yeah, I have some trouble with part of that sentence myself.
Yeah.
Someone-
What does remand mean? Remand a public servant to private life. To look that one up. Remand.
I can look it up for you, or we can
Okay.
look it up now.
Ah,
It's like to hand over.
is that what that means? To hand over?
Yeah, yeah, remand, because they use it in legal. They
Oh, okay.
remand them into custody, kind of thing.
Oh, okay. Thank you. So, and never more surely than now would avowed hostility to God, his day, Sunday, and word and house and kingdom remand a public servant to private life. So hand over a public servant to private life.
A committal to custody. Committal to custody. So they're, yeah, I still struggle with that one. Yeah,
Yeah.
what he said, place a defendant on bail or in custody, especially when a trial is adjourned. That's a verb. And then as a noun, it's a committal to custody. I had a 17-year-old son remanded to drug addiction program. That was a sample sentence. So, so they're taking a public servant to private life, right? Well, maybe, yeah, that is a confusing sentence.
Okay.
Stay in word and house and kingdom, remand a public servant to, and never more surely than now would avowed hostility to God.
If you're remanding them to public life, that means you're kicking them out of the government, from what I can tell.
The public servant is going to be the Congress person, right? The Congress, right?
It says remand a public servant to private life. In other words, if he's a servant and he's messing with the word of God up here, right above it, then they'll remand him to public life. In other words, kick him out for doing that.
So how about we read it, going on that thread, if we read it like this, and never more surely than now would avowed hostility to God remand a public servant to private life.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that sounds about right.
Yeah, so those.
So he's saying that if I'm understanding right, if they don't go along with all of this,
Right.
then they're hostile to God.
Correct.
Right.
And
Okay,
they should be kicked out.
And they should be remanded to public life.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Certainly in the first sentence, you can see that he's commending them.
Yes,
So for those that don't go along with it, they're hostile to God.
exactly.
Okay.
So a compare contrast. He did. Yeah. Okay. Nice. All right. Good work.
But don't take my word for it.
That was what I looked the word up. So you were right about what it said, what it meant.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a legal term.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you. Teamwork. It is evident, therefore, that henceforth religious tests are to be made a qualification for office under the government of the United States. Reverend J.D. Sands of the Seventh United Presbyterian Church, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, in a sermon preached July 17, 1892, said this.
In that sentence above it, it is evident, therefore, that henceforth religious tests are to be made the qualification for office under the government of the United States.
Right.
That's
Right.
totally against the Constitution.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Cool. All right.
There's no religious test is what it says. There's to be no religious test.
Right.
And
Okay. Cool.
I think that's that sentence there is A.T. Jones,
Which one?
the one where it says it is evident.
It is evident.
Jones is
Yeah. Yeah. So this goes back into what he's talking about.
right.
Mhm.
Yeah. And then this is a quote. And then
Based
down
on
here.
what they're saying, this is what he's saying, that
Yeah.
therefore henceforth a religious test is a qualification.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's not going to defend this, what they're doing.
No.
He's opposing it.
Right.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And he's showing us why. Yeah. Okay. So that was a chaplain, J.G. Butler, that said all that confusing sentence. And now we're going to go to this quote from Reverend J.D. Sands of the Seventh United Presbyterian Church. And he says that the church has weight with great political or governing bodies, has been demonstrated most effectually
Yeah.
in the late World's Fair matter, when the United States Senate, the highest body in the country, listened to the voice of religion and passed the World's Fair $5 million appropriation bill with the church instituted proviso that the gates of the Great Exposition should not be opened upon Sunday. That grand good fact suggests to the Christian's mind that if this may be done, so may other equally needful measures. The church is gaining power continually, and its voice will be heard in the future much oftener than in the past.
So it was
Wow.
a big deal when they did that because they're how do you call it, pronouncing their presence of authority.
Mm-hmm.
And
So,
go ahead.
no, you go ahead and finish your thought.
No, they're pronouncing their presence of authority, and then he's saying that that as they're testing their wings, they're gaining more power.
Right, exactly. So I also see, so I realize that we don't have a Sunday law. I'm not, but we do in our time right now have a party that is pushing to have religion over state, or church over state, in the same way as that what they were pushing so much of it back then.
Right.
And then like right here, I was like $5 million just to close the gates. Somebody was going to pocket a whole lot of money on that one, because it doesn't cost $5 million to close the gates.
It seems like, I guess you lose money. Oh, that's probably why, because you lose money when I'm trying to think of why, because if you're not going to open it, then what do you need money for? Because it costs money to open it. So it must be the money that they are losing.
It was, so they're going to pay all these people not to be open or something. I don't know. It just sounds really suspicious. That's a lot of pocket line.
money when you think back in that day. $5 million.
Yeah.
Okay.
5 million.
Yeah.
That was over.
That's like 5 billion to
100
us
years
now,
ago.
right? That's just ridiculous.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So any questions, comments on that? Okay. And one of the men who spent months in Washington as an avowed Christian lobbyist, and who sat in the gallery of the House and clapped his hands in exultation the moment when this World's Fair closing bill finally passed, Reverend H. George D.D. said in a speech in Paterson, New Jersey, August 7th, 1892, these words: "I have learned that we hold the United States Senate in our hands. That is true. Senators in their official place have openly told them so. Finally, the Christian Statesman, October 1st, 1892, celebrating the 25th anniversary of founding for this very purpose, joyfully exclaimed, 'The 40 millions in the Christian homes of the land the ruling majority, when they assert themselves, have won at least one great moral victory in each of the recent sessions of Congress. The Sabbath closing victory with which the quarter century closes shows the way to others that will make the 19th century go out in glory 8 years hence. For the great Christian majority has learned by response to this great petition and its host of letters with reference to the World's Fair that it can have of national and state governments whatever legislation against immorality it will ask unitedly and earnestly. So that, I don't know, that to me that just reminds me of, all the legislation that's coming up before the Senate on the LGBT issues right now. When they're voting, they think on morality instead of people's rights.
Right.
Would anybody else like to read?
I'll go ahead and read.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mhm. It stands, therefore, as an accomplished fact that by a specific religious act of Congress, the government of the United States has been put into the hands of the combined churches and is now at their disposal to use in enforcing upon the American people the dictates and decrees of the church. And thus, by the decision of the Supreme Court and the act of Congress, the Constitution of the United States has been overridden. The distinguishing principle of the government of the United States has been subverted. The intention of the makers of the Constitution and the government has been disregarded. And in the place of all these, there has been established here the living image of the papacy. So A.T. Jones that's him talking, right?
That's correct. Yes.
Yeah. The whole procedure unconstitutional. Yet though it be too late to avoid the consequences, because the principle is established and the consequences have begun, it is not too late to appeal from the act of Congress and even from the decision of the Supreme Court. The right of appeal from any act of Congress is recognized and well known universally. The proper source of appeal from an act of Congress should be the Supreme Court. But in this matter, the Supreme Court has actually led the way, has forestalled the action of Congress, and so has completely shut off this source of appeal. It follows, therefore, that an appeal must lie not only from the act of Congress, but from the decision of the Supreme Court itself. In short, in the situation in which this matter is placed, the appeal must be taken from the whole government of the United States. This is the only source of appeal that remains to the people of the United States, and this does remain. The right of the American citizens to appeal to the government of the United States when it touches any of their reserved rights is an inalienable right.
That's interesting. So, but people didn't squawk, right? Not many.
Oh,
It's interesting because we see what's going on today, and the people have such a wrong understanding of the Constitution that it's just nobody even pays attention to what's happening.
yeah,
I
exactly.
must say nobody. There are people that pay attention, but most don't. And I look back at where I was at before I ever even started reading the Bible. I just took it for granted that the government took care of everything without ever thinking about what they were doing. It's really bad. And so, you know, I know that not everybody's like that, but a good part of the people can be like that.
Yeah, and there's a good portion of people that believe that this nation is Christian.
So yeah, and so what he's saying is the people have a right to appeal even to the decision of the Supreme Court.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Yeah, the people have a right, but they need to know what they're appealing for.
Right. And if you were back then and you were any kind of religious person without understanding the Constitution, you just think it all sounds good. I mean, I think about where we were in conservatism, you know, not knowing that that very stream is the one that's bringing this all to be, and yet that's what we were a part of without even realizing it.
Yeah, exactly. Quite something. That was over 100 years ago.
Yeah.
And it looks like we're in a worse situation right now.
Yeah. The right of American citizens to appeal to the government of the United States when it touches any of their reserved rights, it is an inalienable right.
So we're at the bottom there.
Yeah, she's got to scroll up. Yeah.
The authority of the government of the United States is delegated and not absolute. The authority of the government of the United States is not the supreme authority in the United States because the people did not delegate all their rights in the making and establishment of the government. In the Constitution, the people have declared the enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. The government is but a creature of the Constitution. The people made the Constitution with the delegation only of certain rights. Therefore, the people are the supreme authority in the United States and the source of final appeal in all questions of their reserved rights, and prudent jealousy in the guardianship of these rights against encroachment on the part of the government is the first duty of American citizens. And religious rights are the chief of all these reserved rights, no less than the chief of all natural rights. The government, being but a creature of the Constitution, is subject to the Constitution, having been created by the people. Through the Constitution, it is bound by limitations prescribed by the people in the Constitution. In the Constitution, the people have declared that the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively, or to the people. Quote, no power in or over or concerning religion has been delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor has such power been prohibited by it to the states. All questions and all matters of religion, therefore, are withheld from the government of the United States and are reserved and belong exclusively to the states or to the people. As no power concerning religion has been delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, as all power and jurisdiction in matters of religion has been reserved exclusively to the states or to the people, it follows inevitably that the government has no power or authority or jurisdiction in, over, or concerning the subject of religion, and that therefore the Supreme Court of the United States had no authority or right to declare the American people a religious people, or this nation a Christian nation, nor had Congress any right to establish or require the recognition or observance of the Christian Sabbath. Again, not only has no authority or jurisdiction in matters of religion been delegated to the United States by the Constitution, but all such authority or jurisdiction has actually been prohibited to the United States by the Constitution. Religion cannot rightly be made in any sense a requisite to the governmental authority of the United States, because the Constitution prohibits, I think I'm pronouncing that right, prohibited it in the words, no religious test shall ever be required as a qualification to any office or public trust under the United States. The government can never rightly legislate in any way upon matters of religion, because the Constitution prohibits it in the words. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Religion cannot rightly be made a requisite to the citizenship of the United States, because the supreme law says, quote, the government of the United States is not in any sense founded on the Christian religion. Therefore, as all religion, and specifically the Christian religion, is prohibited, the government of the United States by the supreme law, and as the Supreme Court and Congress are but coordinate branches of the government of the United States, it follows inevitably that the Supreme Court not only has no power to declare, but was directly and positively by the supreme law prohibited from declaring the American people, quote, a religious people, or this nation, quote, a Christian nation. And Congress was equally prohibited from discussing or deciding the Sabbath question, and from establishing or requiring the observance of the Sabbath, not even by discussing it. You shouldn't even be in this whole area, this whole field of religion.
Agreed.
Yet again, as the government is but a creature of the supreme law, it is subject to the supreme law. And although the Supreme Court is the official interpreter of the supreme law, yet the court itself is bound by the supreme law. And although Congress is the official lawmaking power of the government, yet it is restricted, and its power is limited by the Constitution as the supreme law. Therefore, as the Supreme Court and Congress are but coordinate branches of the government of the United States, and as the government of the United States is positively prohibited by the supreme law from any jurisdiction in question of any religion, it follows inevitably that when the Supreme Court and Congress entered the field of religion, carried on a discussion in favor of religion, and officially decided and declared that the American people is a religious people, and this nation a Christian nation, and officially decided that Sunday is the Christian Sabbath, and established and required the observance thereof as the Christian Sabbath. Both the court and Congress did not only what they had no authority to do, but what they were positively prohibited from doing, and so violated the supreme law and placed themselves in a position where their conclusions, their declarations, and their decisions so far possess no legality or validity whatsoever. In pleading before the Virginia Convention for the ratification of the Constitution, Madison said, "There is not a shadow of right in the general government to intermeddle with religion. Its least interference with it would be a most flagrant usurpation, a most flagrant usurpation, that word,
Usurpation.
usurpation. This being true and the intent of the makers of the Constitution, it is easy for any person to see and to state just what these actions of the general government are. 8.2. So there must be at the end of that sentence.
It's probably a reference
Yeah.
at the end.
Consequently, the conclusions of this whole matter, the sum of all that has been or that can be said upon it is, and the demonstration is complete, that the declaration, the decision, and the act of the Supreme Court and the Congress of the United States, that this is a religious nation, a religious people, and a Christian nation, and that Sunday is the Sabbath and should be so observed, are unconstitutional and void and utterly destitute of any authority whatever. Bold letters there.
Capital bold.
Capital bold,
Really
yeah.
helpful for us to see for our own self when it comes to standing for the rights of people, because that's what he's doing. He's standing for the rights,
Yes,
for the Constitution, what the founding fathers actually said, and pointing out how they, what'd you say, flagrant usurpation, and
yes, flagrant.
I don't know enough about the history to know. I mean, I'm sure he wasn't the only one fighting for what was right, but it doesn't seem that too many people really squawked much. You know what I'm saying? Just like we look at today, it's not like a lot of people are really saying much. There's those that are arguing in the courts for rights. You know, when we watch some of the senators and the things that they've argued for when it you know, I look at Cory Booker. I don't know if you guys know which one he is.
Mm-hmm.
I was hoping he would
Yeah,
make it to president.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's from New Jersey, I think.
Yeah, because I mean,
Congressman from
he
New
makes
Jersey.
some really good arguments for the rights of people. And from what I've seen, I haven't watched a lot of him, but he made good arguments to the things that were going on, and you know, logical. But it's interesting because these senators are and the representatives, Congress, they're representatives of the people, and you don't have, I don't know, it's like everybody's so distracted. At least when you look at the right, the far right, they're definitely so distracted with their goals and their agenda
Yeah.
that back then, I don't know how much did people really notice, or you know, I think back to when some of the videos that I watched in the past about Kennedy when he was killed, and but prior to, leading up, there were some of the videos that I watched that showed that people did still remember what the Catholic Church did, and they were really worried about having a Catholic president. So I mean, it makes you wonder who knows, how many people understand what is going on. You know, I don't know if I'm making any sense. How many people understand what is going on?
Right. And those who think that they do think that it's going to be the Catholic Church, when in reality it's going to be her daughters, the Protestants.
Yeah.
So they're looking for the Catholic Church to make a move, and it's not going to be that.
Mm-hmm.
We still have more light.
Yeah, exactly. But those, the one,
Unless I'm misunderstanding. Am I misunderstanding?
No, definitely more light to come out on that, because the three structures that we're looking at is modern Israel,
Mm-hmm.
the counterfeit, and Protestantism.
Right. So it's all three. Yeah. Catholics,
All three.
Protestants, and the SD.
Because I remember when it started to, you know, it was starting to look like, or trying to think of how to say it, and people were starting to get the understanding that the Catholic Church doesn't have anything to do with anything, and I never thought that was right. And then I remember Elder Tess saying that the Catholic Church does have to do with all of this, but you know, there's a structure that's there, that's in line, just like we saw. All three structures are in alignment now and ready for action. So, but how that looks, I don't know. But this history is really amazing to see, especially from this document, how it's not just we're seeing the image today because of what we know. You can see the image a long time ago.
yeah,
They followed the template, they followed the pattern, and did it just as Rome did it.
yep. Protestants are the daughters
Yeah.
of Rome. They learned from Rome, the mother.
Yeah.
And I'm sure the Catholic Church will be more than happy when all of this takes place. But of course, there'll be people that are going to have their eyes open to see this.
You know, I think about that too because the left, the Democrats, I don't know so much about the right. The right seems to be evangelicals. I mean, there's Catholics probably on both, but it seems like you have your evangelicals more so on the right, and then you have your Catholics more so on the Democrat side. And I don't know. I know we need to study more and understand more.
Yes, always. Would somebody else want to read?
I'll read for a minute.
Okay.
So our appeal is remonstrance.
Yes.
For these reasons, as Christians, as Protestants, as American citizens, and as men, we do now and forever appeal from the decision of the Supreme Court of the United States of February 29, 1892. Must have been a leap year, huh?
Yeah, must have been one more day.
Yeah, which declares this to be a religious people and a Christian nation, and from the Act of Congress, which establishes Sunday as the Sabbath. As Christians, we appeal on the ground of the divine right, which Jesus Christ has recognized and declared the right of every man to dissent even from the words and the religion of Christ. These are his words: if any man hear my words and believe not, I judge him not. For I came not to judge the world, but to save the world. As Protestants, we appeal on the ground of the historical right to protest. Protestants protest against every interference of civil government in the affairs of religion. The Grand Charter of Protestantism, the Augsburg Confession, declares the civil administration is occupied about other matters than is the gospel. The magistracy, is that how you say that word? Magistracy does not defend the souls, but the bodies and bodily things against manifest injuries, and coerces men by the sword and corporal punishment, that it may uphold civil justice and peace. Wherefore the ecclesiastical and the civil power are not to be confounded. The ecclesiastical power has its own command to preach the gospel and administer the sacraments. Let it not by force enter into the office of another. Let it not transfer worldly kingdoms. Let it not prescribe laws to the magistrate touching the form of the state. As Christ says, my kingdom is not of this world. As American citizens, we appeal on the ground of the specifically declared constitutional rights to the free exercise of religion according to the dictates of the individual conscience, totally free and exempt from all governmental connection, interference, or control. As men, we appeal on the ground of the natural right of mankind to render to the Creator such homage and such only as each man believes to be acceptable to him, which right men possess by virtue of being men, and not by virtue of government, which was theirs before government was, and which would be theirs though there were no earthly government at all, which is their own in their essential meaning of the term, which is precedent to all the claims of civil society, and which would be the same to each man, though there were not another person on earth, which they do not hold by any subinfeudation, but by direct homage and allegiance to the owner and Lord of all. And whether as Christians, as Protestants, as American citizens, or as men, that we mean by religion always and everywhere is the duty which we owe to our Creator and the manner of discharging it. Finally, in this our appeal from this action of the government of the United States and our remonstrance against the principle and all the consequences of the action, we adopt and adapt the words of Madison, Jefferson, the Presbyterians, the Baptists, the Quakers, and other good people of Virginia in their memorable defense against the establishment of the Christian religion there and the making of that a Christian state. We would humbly represent that the only proper objects of civil government are the happiness and protection of men in the present state of existence, the security of life, liberty, and property of the citizens, and to restrain the vicious and encourage the virtuous by wholesome laws equally extending to every individual. But religion, or the duty which we owe to our Creator and the manner of discharging it, can be directed only by reason and conviction, and is nowhere cognizable but at the tribunal of the universal judge. To illustrate and confirm these assertions, we beg leave to observe that to judge for ourselves and to engage in the exercise of religion agreeably to the dictates of our own consciences is an inalienable right, which upon the principles on which the gospel was first propagated and the Reformation from papacy carried on, can never be transferred to another. We maintain, therefore, that in matters of religion, no man's right is abridged by the institution of civil society, and that religion is wholly exempt from its cognizance. 2, where was number 1? Did I miss number 1? I don't remember seeing a number 1.
I don't remember seeing a number 1 either, unless it's this right here.
Yeah, maybe. If religion be exempt from the authority of society at large, much more is it exempt from the authority of the government. The latter is but the creature and vicegerent of the former. Its jurisdiction is both derivative and limited. It is limited with regard to the coordinate departments of the government, and more necessarily is it limited with regard to the whole people. The preservation of free government requires not merely that the metes and bounds which separate each department of the governmental power be invariably maintained, but more especially that neither of them be suffered to overleap the great barrier which defends the rights of the people. The rights of the people. The rulers who are guilty of such encroachment exceed the commission from which they derive their authority and are tyrants. The people who submit to it are governed by laws made neither by themselves nor by any authority derived from theme and are slaves. It is proper to take alarm at the first experiment upon our liberties. We hold this prudent jealousy to be the first duty of citizens and the noblest character of the American Revolution. The free men of America did not wait till usurped power had strengthened itself by exercise and entangled itself in precedents. They saw all the consequences in the principle, and we went through that last time, that all the consequences that come after the effect are all in the principle. The principles that they set up and they established, and they avoided the consequences by denying the principle. We revere this lesson too much soon to forget it. Who does not see that the same authority that can establish Christianity in exclusion of all other religions may establish with the same ease any particular sect of Christians in exclusion of all other sects? And it is impossible for the magistrate to adjudge the right of preference among the various sects that profess the Christian faith without erecting a claim to infallibility, which would lead us back to the Church of Rome. Who does not see that the same authority that can require assent to Christianity as the national religion may with the same propriety require assent to each particular phase and feature of that religion? That the same authority that can require the observance of the Christian Sabbath may, by the same right, require the observance of every other Christian practice, custom, or institution. Nay, more, that with the same propriety and the same right, the authority which may require assent to Christianity as the national religion may require assent to any other religion which the shifting policy of government might seem to demand. For it is certain that there is no argument in favor of establishing the Christian religion which may not with equal propriety be pleaded for establishing the tenets of Muhammad by those who believe the Quran, or Buddhism, or any other religion by those who believe in such religion. During almost 16 centuries has the legal establishment of Christianity been on trial under a number of different claims and phases. What have been its fruits? More or less in all places, pride, indolence, and insolence in the favored clergy, ignorance and servility in the assenting laity, in both superstition, bigotry, and persecution. Inquire of the teachers of Christianity for the ages in which it appeared in its greatest power and luster. Those of every sect will point to the time before its incorporation with the civil powers, whether it be viewed in its first propagation by the apostles, or in it, I think your cursor's there, or in its revival, in its revival in the Great Reformation. On the other hand, what influence, in fact, have established religions had or civil society. Okay, on the other hand, what influence, in fact, have established religions had or civil society? In some instances, they have been seen to erect spiritual tyranny on the ruins of civil authority. In many instances, they have been seen upholding the thrones of political tyranny. In no instance have they been seen the guardians of the liberties of the people. I'm going to start that one over again.
I think this should be on.
Yeah, I think so too. On the other hand, what influence, in fact, have established religions had on civil society? Thank you. In some instances, they have been seen to erect spiritual tyranny on the ruins of civil authority. In many instances, they have been seen upholding the thrones of political tyranny. In no instance have they been seen the guardians of the liberties of the people. A just government instituted to secure and perpetuate public liberty needs them not. Such a government will be best supported by protecting every citizen in the enjoyment of his religion with the same equal hand which protects his person and property, by neither invading the equal right of any sect or individual, nor suffering any sect to invade those of another or any individual. It's interesting how much insight he had.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, because you look at what we were looking at 2 years ago, and he, during this time, sees that it's about the rights of all to practice whatever religion they want, according to the dictates of their conscience. They're right. They have that right.
Right.
And I can't say that we were, well, I don't want to say we weren't looking at people have the right. We do. They have the right to worship or not. But to understand the conservative side of religious freedom, what religious freedom is to them.
And the danger it is to everyone.
Yeah. This establishment of a national religion here is a serious departure from that generous disposition of the government, which, offering an asylum to the persecuted and oppressed of every nation and religion, has made this nation the glory of the ages, the glorious land, and accepting the papacy, the admiration of the world. So you don't have the admiration of the papacy, but you have the admiration of the world.
Accepting.
You know, mocking of the papacy as they watched us do the very same thing. What a melancholy mark is this decision of sudden degeneracy. Instead of holding forth still an asylum to the persecuted, it is itself a signal of persecution. It degrades from the equal rank of citizens all whose opinions in religion do not bend to those of the governmental authority. Distant as it may be in the present form from the Inquisition, it differs from it only in degree. The one is the first step, the other is the last in the career of intolerance. So comparing it to the Inquisition, and just because it doesn't look like it right now, it's the last step. The one is the first step, the other is the last. Okay, henceforth, the magnanimous, is that her? Magnanimous, is that how you said that?
That sounds right.
Magnanimous, thank you.
Magnanimous there.
To think that one through. Okay, henceforth, the magnanimous sufferer from this cruel scourge in foreign regions must view this action of our government as a beacon on our coast, warning him that now there is on earth no haven where he may be secure from religious oppression and persecution. And now all of a sudden there's a 7.
Yeah.
I remember a 3, a 2 and a 3, but I don't remember a 4, 5, 6.
I remember a 4 also, but yeah, I don't remember the 5 and the 6.
Maybe they're just not numbering everything.
But notice that now there is on earth no haven.
Right.
And that we used to be a haven.
Right. That people could come here and worship according to the dictates of their own conscience.
Right.
Yeah.
They were free to choose their religion.
No place on earth.
Yeah. Now there was no, this was the glorious
Yeah.
land. That's where they were to have that freedom.
Yeah.
Finally, the equal right of every citizen to the free exercise of religion, according to the dictates of the individual conscience, is held by the same tenure as all other rights. If we recur to its origin, it is equally the gift of nature. If we weigh its importance, it cannot be less clear to us. If we consult the national constitution, the grand charter of those rights which pertain to the good people of the United States, it is not only enumerated with equal solemnity, but it is reserved with studied and special emphasis. Either then, we must say that the will of the governmental authority is the only measure of that authority, and that in the plenitude of that authority, it may sweep away all our fundamental rights, or that it is bound to leave this particular right untouched and sacred. Either we must say that the governmental authorities may control the freedom of the press, may abolish the trial by jury, nay, that they may despoil us of our very right of suffrage and erect themselves into the independent and hereditary body, or we must say that they had no authority to make the declaration and decision or to pass the acts under consideration. We say that the government of the United States has no such authority, and in order that no effort may be omitted on our part against so dangerous a usurpation, we oppose to it this appeal and remonstrance. I'll let somebody else go forward with the conclusion.
Would somebody else like to read?
Yeah, I can read some.
Okay, thank you.
We, therefore, as Christians, as Protestants, as American citizens, and as men, appealing to the supreme judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do, in the name and by the authority of the natural rights of mankind, of the Constitution of the United States, of the history of more than 1800 years, and of the Lord Jesus Christ, solemnly publish and declare that we are and of right ought to be free and independent of all connection, direction, dictation, interference, or control of the government of the United States in matters of religion or religious observances or institutions of any kind or degree, and that as such we have full right to be religious or not religious, to worship or not to worship according to the dictates of our own consciences and the conviction of our own minds, and, and for the support of this appeal, remonstrance, and declaration, and with a firm reliance on, on the protection of God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, we mutually pledge to each other and to the world our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. Amen and amen. And let all the people say amen. Appendix. For the benefit of the reader, we give in full the text of the Supreme Court decision. Supreme Court of the United States, number 143, October term 1891. The rector, church warrants, and in heir to the circuit judge of the United States, vestryman of the Church of the Holy States for the Southern District of New Trinity, plaintiffs in heir. Okay. The it says York versus the United States. Mr. Justice Brewer delivered the opinion of the court. Plaintiff in heir is a corporation is a corporation duly organized and incorporated as a religious society under the law of the United States of New York. E. Walpole Warren was, prior to September 1887, an alien resident in England. In that month, the plaintiff in heir made a contract with him by which he was to remove to the city of New York, excuse me, and enter into service as rector and pastor. And in pursuance of such contract, Warren did so remove and enter upon such service. It is claimed by the United States that the contract on the part of the plaintiff in heir was forbidden by Chapter 164-23, Statute 332, and an action was commenced to recover the penalty prescribed by that act. The circuit court held that the contract, scroll please, was within prohibition of the statute and rendered judgment accordingly. 36 Fed Rep 303. And in the single question presented for our demonstration is whether it erred in that conclusion. The first section described that the act forbidden and is in these words, be enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America in Congress assembled. That form and after the passage of the act, it shall be unlawful for any person, company, partnership, or corporation in any manner whatsoever to pay to prepay the transportation or in any way assist or encourage the importation or migration of any alien or aliens, any foreign or foreigners into the United States, its territories or District of Columbia under contract or agreement, patrol or special express or implied made previous to the importation or migration of such alien or aliens, foreign or foreigners, to perform labor or services in any kind in the United States, its territories, or the District of Columbia. It must be conceded that the act of the corporation is within the letter of this section, for the relation of the rector to his church is one of service, and implies labor on the one side with compensation on the other. Not only are the general words labor and service both used, but also, as it were, to guard against any narrow interpretation or emphasize a uh, breadth of meaning. To them is added of any kind, and and further, as noticed by the circuit judge in his opinion. The fifth section, which makes specific exceptions among them professional actors, artists, lecturers, singers, and domestic servants, strengthen the idea that every other kind of labor and service was intended to be reached by the first section. While there is great force to this reasoning, we cannot think Congress intended to denounce with penalties a transaction like like that in the present case. It is a familiar rule that a thing may be within the letter of the statute and yet not within the statute, because not within the spirit nor within the intention of its makers. This has been often asserted, and the reports are full of cases illustrating its application. This is not the substitution of the will of, scroll please, of the judge for that of the legislator, for frequently words of general meaning are used in a statute. Words broad enough to include an act in question, and yet a consideration of the whole legislation or of the circumstances surrounding the enactment, or of the absurd results which follows from giving such broad meaning to the words, make it unreasonable to believe that the legislator intended to include the particular act, as said in Plowden 205, from which cases it appears that the sages of the law heretofore have constituted statutes quite contrary to the letter of some appearance, and those statutes which comprehend to all things in the letter, they have expounded to extend to but some things, and those which generally prohibit all people from doing such an act, they have interpreted to permit some people to do it, and those which include every person in the letter, they have adjudged to reach to some persons only, which exposition have always been founded upon the intent of the legislature, which they have collected sometimes by considering the case and necessary to make the act, sometimes by comparing one part of the act with another, and sometimes by foreign circumstances. In Pierre Company versus Hammond, C.J. Abbott quotes from Lord Coke as follows: Acts of Parliament are to be so construed as no man that is innocent or free from injury or wrong be by a literal constitution, a construction, punished or endangered. In the case of the state versus Clark, 5 Dutcher 96 and 99, it appears that the act has been passed making it a misdemeanor to willfully break down a fence in the possession of another person. Clark was indicted under that statute. The defense was that the act of breaking down the fence through willful was in exercise of legal right to go upon his own land. The trial the trial court rejected the testimony offered to sustain the defense, and the Supreme Court held that this ruling was error. In its opinion, the court used this language: the Act of 1855 in terms makes the willful opening, breaking down, or injuring of any fence belonging to or in possession of any other person a misdemeanor. In what sense is the term willful used? In common parlance, willful is used in the sense of intentional and distinguished from accidental or involuntary. Whatever one does intentionally, he does willfully. Is it used? Is it used in that sense in this act? Did the legislature intend to make the intentional opening of the fence for the purpose of going upon the land of another indictable, if done by permission or for a lawful purpose? We cannot suppose such to have been the actual intent. To adopt such a construction would put a stop to the ordinary business of life. The language of the act, if construed of the words of the statute, be absurd. The act must be so construed as to avoid the absurdity. The court must restrain the words. The object designed to be reached by the act must limit and control the literal import of the terms and phrases employed. In the United States versus Kirby, 7 Wall 482 and 486, the defendant were indicted for the violations of an act of Congress, providing that if any person shall knowingly or willingly obstruct or retard the passage of the mail, or of any driver or carrier, or of any horse or carriage carrying the same, he shall, upon conviction, For every such offense, pay a fine not to exceed $100. The specific charge was that the defendant knowingly and willfully retarded the passage of one Ferris, a carrier of the mail, while engaged in the performance of his duty, and as in like manner retarded the steamboat General Buell at the time engaged in carrying the mail. To this indictment, the defendants pleaded especially that Ferris had been indicted for murder by the court of comp- com- competent. Competent authority in Kentucky, that the bench warrant had been issued and placed in the hands of the defendant. Kirby, the sheriff of the county, commanding him to arrest Ferris and bring him before the court to answer in the indictment, and that in the obedience to this warrant, he and the other defendants, as his pose, entered upon the steamboat General Buell and arrested Ferris, and used only such force as was necessary to accomplish that arrest. The question asked to the sufficiency of the plea was was certified that the court, and it was held that the arrest of Ferris upon the warrant from the state court was not an obstruction of the mail or the retarding of the passage of a carrier of the mail within the meaning of the act. In its opinion, the court says all laws should receive a sensible construction. General terms should be so limited in their application as not to lead to injustice, oppression, or an absurd consequence. It will always, therefore, be presumed that the legislature intended exception to its language, which would avoid results of this character. The reason of the law in such cases should prevail over its letter. The common sense of man approves the judgment mentioned by uh, Puffendorf that the Bulgarian Guinean law, which enacted that whoever drew blood in the street should be punished with the utmost severity, did not intend to the surgeon who opened the vein of a person who fell down in the street in a fit. The same common sense accepts the ruling cited by Plowden that the statute of First Edward II, which enacts that a prisoner who breaks prison shall be guilty of a felony, does not extend to a prisoner who breaks out when the prison is on fire, for he is not to be hanged because lie would not stay to be burnt. And we think that a like common sense will sanction the ruling we make that the act of Congress which punishes the obstruction or retarding of the passage of the mail or its carrier does not apply to a case of temporary detention of the mail caused by the arrest of the carrier upon indictment for murder. The following cases may also be cited: Henry versus Tilson, uh, Reigate versus Wardsboro. Okay, I won't go over the statute or
That's fine with me if nobody else objects. Want to skip to here?
yeah.
Yeah, I'm fine. It's interesting, all the stuff that they're not even to the point of what of the whole document,
Yeah.
Right.
the part that you highlighted.
It's among other things which may be considered in determining the intent of the legislature is the title of the act. We do not mean that it may be used to add or take from the body of the statute, Hayden versus the collector, but it may help to interpret its meaning in the case of the United States versus Fisher.
Oh, sorry.
Cranch, let's see, Chief Justice Marshall said, on the influence which the title ought to have in construing and in enacting clauses, much has been said, and yet it is not easy to discern the point of difference between the opposing counsel in this respect. Neither party contends that the title of the act can control plain words in the body of the statute, and neither denies that, taken with other parts, it may assist in removing ambiguities where the intent is plain. Nothing is left to construction, where the mind labors to discover the design of the legislature. It seizes everything from which aid can be derived. And in such case, the title claims a degree of notice and will have its due share of consideration. And in the case of the United States versus Palmer 3, Wheaton, 610, 631, the same judge applied the doctrine in this way. The words of the section are in terms of unlimited extent. The words any person or person and broad enough to comprehend every human being, but general words must not only be limited to cases within the jurisdiction of the state, but also to those objects to which the legislature intended to apply them. Did the legislature intend to apply these words to the subject of the foreign power, who in a foreign ship may commit murder or robbery on the high seas? The title of the act cannot cannot control its words, but may furnish some aid in showing what was in the mind of the legislature. The title of this act, an act for punishment of certain crimes against the United States, it would seem that offenses against the United States, not offenses against the human race, were the crimes which the legislature intended by this law to punish. it will be seen that words as general as those used in the first section of this act were by that decision limited, and the intent of Congress, which with respect to the act was gathered partially, at least from its title. Now, the title of the act is the Act of Prohibited the Importation and Migration of Foreigners and Aliens under contract or agreement to perform labor in the United States, its territories, and the District of Columbia. Obviously, the thought expressed in this reaches only to the work of the manual laborer as distinguished from the professional man. No one reading such a title would suppose that Congress had in its mind any purpose of staying the coming into the country of ministers of the gospel, or indeed of any class whose toil is that of the brain. The common understanding of the terms labor and laborers does not include preaching or preachers, and it is to be assumed that words and phrases are used in their ordinary meaning. So whatever of light is thrown upon the statue by the language of the title indicates an exclusion from its um, penal provisions of all contracts for the employment of ministers, rectors, and pastors. Again, another guide to the meaning of the statute is found in the evil which it is designed to remedy. And for this, the court properly looks at the con- contemporaneous contemporaneous events, the situation as it existed, and as it was pressed upon the attention of the legislative body. United States versus Railroad Company, 91 U.S. 7279. The situation which called for this statute was briefly but fully stated by Mr. Justice Brown when a district judge he decided the case of the United States versus Craig, 28 Fed Rep 795 798. The motives and history of the act are matters of common knowledge. It has become the practice for large capitalists in this country to contract their agents abroad for the shipment of great numbers of ignorant and civil class of foreign laborers under contract by which
I lost where I was. By which the employer agreed.
by which the employer agreed, upon the one hand, to prepay their passage, while upon the other hand, the laborers agreed to work after their arrival for a certain time at a low rate of wage. The effect of this was to break down the labor market and to reduce other laborers engaged in like occupations to the level of the assisted immigrant. The evil finally became so flagrant that an appeal was made to Congress for relief by the passage of the act in question. The design on which was to raise the standard of foreign immigrants and to discountenance the migration, migration, I'm sorry, migration of those who had not sufficient means in their own hands, or those of their friends who paid their passage. I can't see the thing because of the chat. Okay. It appears also for the petitions and in the testimony presented before the Committee of Congress that it was this cheap, unskilled labor which was making trouble and the influx. Okay, I think I'm done reading.
Okay. Does anybody else want to take a turn?
I was trying to go back to earlier part of the document to refresh myself on this, because it was an issue that came about with hiring people, bringing in immigrants, paying their way here, and then they would work off their fare that was paid for them to come here with cheap labor. And it was it had to do with this distinction between paying for clergy to come over, ministers. And that,
Right.
yeah, I was trying to go back and review that real quick to, because a lot of that I was like, what's he talking about? What are they talking about? But I had to go back and refresh my memory where we started. But that, yeah, this is part of it anyways, what I posted in here, that the said decision, which we noticed first, was called out in this way. In 1887, Congress enacted a law forbidding any aliens to come to this country under contract to perform labor or service of any kind. The reason of that law was that large contractors in the United States and corporations who wanted to increase their wealth with as little expense as possible would send agents to Europe to employ the lowest of the people whom they could get to come over and work. They would pay their expenses over and allow them to work it out at very small wages after they got over here. This was depreciating the price that Americans should receive for their labor, and therefore Congress enacted a law, and it goes on as follows. But they wanted to exclude, they were trying to say that, I need to go back and reread that section myself more again to refresh my memory, but they were making a justification for paying a minister through this process, if I remember right. Anybody else remember that?
No, do you want to go back and find it? Or
That's
how
what
far?
I was kind of trying to do, but maybe I'll do it before we're probably pretty close to finishing this. We're just reading the actual judgment. And a good part of it was actually in the document itself, in what he quoted, because some of this was what he was just reading. But I have to go back and find it to get specifically. I found part of it, but it was talking about I just haven't found the right part yet. But there was this distinction because it was money being paid for ministers.
Okay. So do you want me to keep going? It's 15 to 8.
I don't know if I'll leave it up to everybody else if they want to read through the actual, I think you're probably getting into it. How many more pages is there?
Okay. Well, we're on page, let's see, right here, we're on page 78, and there's 88 pages, but let's see how much of it is reference. Like, you know how sometimes there's a appendix at the end. So references, let's see.
Yeah, we won't be able to finish 10 pages.
No. So are we going to read through the actual, that's what this is, right?
It's up to anybody else if I don't know that we need to. I'd like to be able to go back maybe and review the issue that began it.
Okay.
Not tonight, because
Right.
we're almost done.
Okay.
But,
So these last 2 pages are just what are footnotes,
Yeah.
and then this is the end of the whole judgment. And it's got a lot of legal speak in it, and
Yeah.
I don't know, lost me. So what do you guys want to do? Are we gonna finish this another day, or are we just gonna go back and
I'd rather go back, try to go back and just review what they're talking about here when it came to the ministers,
okay.
to see how they to follow that step, how they got from there to making this a Christian nation.
Okay. So where did this start? Following cases.
Yeah, a little bit further back, I think. Oh. Or maybe you already passed it.
Messed up. How did I pass it? Mhm.
I was thinking if anybody wanted to take on more study of the passages that you were reading on the Sabbath.
I
Not tonight. I'm talking about going forward.
So are you just talking about just
Right.
reading through it?
In Story of Redemption, no,
Uh-huh.
taking it and trying to break down and see there's a lot in there that I think is really helpful to us.
So like parable kind of thing,
Yeah.
where the group of us kind of look at it as a parable.
Yes.
And should we start from the beginning as we do that, or start from chapter 2?
You mean?
Because if we're going to be, because what I did was just read through it. We weren't really going through it like parable, like, you know.
Yeah, not chapter 2, but that section there, and then War in Heaven. The fall. It was the fall of Lucifer, right? And then War in Heaven.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. I've continued to
So
look at that, and it's just, I think there's a lot that's really helpful to us when we see the how the Father did not get rid of, and we kind of touched on this, did not get rid of Lucifer, but rather he let the whole thing play out.
mm-hmm.
And it was necessary because what we see externally now is people manifesting their character, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we've seen that internally too, is it brings about this manifestation of the true character.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a lot of points to be made in there where the angels were trying to reason with Lucifer and the other angels, that it, so if you were to put us in those places, do you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Of
and know that they were able to bring some of those angels back. I
Right.
mean, not back after they left, but bring them in, you know, by reasoning, they were able to get them to change their mind and see what was going on.
Right. But it shows the necessity of circumstances being played out for all of our benefit. To the angels had to be able to see what was going on.
Right. And so it had, you know, with he didn't remove Trump, you know, he let that go. The pandemic, he's let that go. And the, you know, we have natural disasters, he's letting all that happen to mature it, he has to, so it can play out, so we can see what people are going to do, what people are going to say, how they're going to react. Yeah, it's just and you know, the Sabbath was another thing, he had to bring some situations, some words, some thoughts, some mindsets to the surface so it can be discussed. We have to be able to see where we're in error and be able to bring that up and work through it.
Yeah,
So internally and externally.
internally and externally. Yeah, and I think it would be interesting to trace, you can see it pretty clearly, but to trace the progression of Lucifer
Hmm.
until it became genuine rebellion,
Hmm.
which is incurable.
Yeah, that's crazy.
But then he takes it further because then he wants to go and make sure others go with him
Hmm.
and share in the same consequences with him. So yeah, I think that section there, the fall of Lucifer and War in Heaven, I don't remember if that's the entire chapter before you move to the next chapter, and I think what might have been.
Yeah.
Um,
But even chapter 2 and 3, let's see, let's see, where was it? We're pretty good too.
yeah, I've been going through, listening to some of it and then reading it too.
Yeah.
The creation and consequences of rebellion.
Mm-hmm. So
Yeah, because that goes into, and then temptation and the fall. It also goes into more of Satan and how.
right. And then chapter 5 is called the plan of salvation.
Right.
And so I thought that one was pretty good too. So at least those first 5 chapters. What do you think?
I think it's great if somebody wanted to.
We could, well, it's kind of a group thing, and I would be willing. I've already copied those chapters into a Word document
Okay.
to present. So if we want to work on it as a group, like on some
Good.
of our empty Thursdays or Wednesdays, or Jackie is almost done with Guadalupe 15. This 15 is the last one, so this Friday will be our last one. Do we want to?
Did we already put something in, or did we already have plans of something else going on in there?
No. We have we, Jackie, talked about anything else?
We talked about following up with revolutions.
Oh, that's true. Uh-huh.
Yeah. I'm not sure how many studies there are on that, maybe
4.
4.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And those are already done. I don't know if they've been redone or as,
No,
yeah.
not like the Guadalupe presentations.
Yeah.
No.
So we'd have to look at that. You and I, Christine, could do that just to kind of get an idea of what that entails. Not saying, I mean, we could take it as it is, but where would he, we just have to, where do they fit in? Those 4 studies. I mean, yeah, they're review and it'd be good, but it would be fitting into something, I'm sure, after finishing Guadalupe.
Mm-hmm. Or should we work on these 5 chapters of the story of redemption and do it as a parable on Friday?
Well, yeah, but what about the time segment on Sabbath? Is that
Looking at
filled with something else?
they're filled right now for a little ways.
Do you want me to share the?
You can if you want. I was just looking at it on my end.
So where are we with this?
Am I sharing right now?
I got it. I'll pull it up real quick.
With Jones's writings here. Have we finished this now?
This one here we have, other than I'd like to, I mean, whether or not we do it as a group or not, it'd be good review to go back and just to remind ourselves of how what that began as. And I know it had to do with what they were talking about, bringing people over here as cheap labor, and they were using that to justify, if I remember right. I want to get that straight in my head. But anyways, that's how it came into to eventually calling us a Christian nation and then graduating.
Right.
So I want to follow that path, to re-follow that path. Now we've basically read it, go back and follow that path.
So are you saying we would do maybe one more Monday with that pathway,
Maybe if everybody's up to it. I think
which
it'd
is
be a good
every
idea.
other Monday? It's been every other Monday, right?
Right, but I think it'd be good if we on our own tried to look
Ah,
at it and bring that together instead of trying to go through the document again.
yeah, and if everyone has that, and we have it, everyone has Jones's writings, the
Yeah.
pioneers.
Yeah, well, we sent the file out, so
Okay, yeah. Gotcha there. So the story of redemption then. Is that what you're thinking? Friday night?
maybe,
Maybe.
yeah.
So
And that is a week from Friday.
And if we could keep in mind too, some of the other writings of A.T. Jones going forward,
Mm-hmm.
to get more understanding of the arguments that he made.
Yeah. Sounds good. However it fits, wherever.
Yeah.
I'd still like to do the revolution.
You can,
Because that was kind of my thought to begin with when I started the Guadalupe studies.
that would be a good idea.
okay.
Sister Christine,
Uh-huh.
you could probably open up that Wednesday, the 24th, and move that one, because I don't know if I'm going to be able to pull that off that quick. I have the group threat done, and I've got the slideshow to make on the Covenanters, and then I have a week, basically a week and a half, to try to get those two done. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to pull them off back to back, but I can do one of them. So that could be, we could do some filler in there for that.
Okay. So Wednesday the 17th and Wednesday the 24th, we could do that.
I think so. Yeah.
And then I'll move your
Or we could-
others.
Yeah, and we can even do the revolutions on a Wednesday or Friday, either way.
Well, we could do the revolutions on the Friday.
Okay, and then Wednesday, the story of redemption.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
How's that work?
Okay, yeah. And so
Okay.
just bump me up the identifying the threat, maybe to the following
To-
Wednesday.
To the following Wednesday.
Yeah, so you and I can talk about revolutions tomorrow night because we're going to meet, Christine,
Okay.
as long as it's still good for you.
Yeah. So
I can take a look at that because it's on the website.
for the revolutions.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Oops.
Then our every other Monday will be switched out since we're finished with this one. Other than I think it would be a good idea if we did it on our own time, not during the Bible study, and then bring together some of the points, if anybody's up to that.
Okay. So you think we can do that in just 2 Wednesdays?
What, revolutions?
The study of redemption.
Oh, no, no. We could just take it and go as far as we can with it and use it as filler again too.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah.
Hey, Christina, I'm doing that one on revolutions too, that number 7.
Oh, that's right. That's right. That is a more recent one. I think what Jackie is talking about is from Brazil. Is that right, Jackie?
I think it is, yeah.
Okay. And then Robert, you're talking about ones that were from Elder Test. They're more recent. I don't have that one open.
Okay.
Let's see, where's that list?
I'm not done with it yet.
Did you want to pick a date for that?
Well, what do you got open?
Let's see. Where's my share screen? You cannot start sharing.
Wait, I gotta find my glasses.
Okay.
Here we
Okay.
go. What's this, March?
Yeah, we're in March.
Okay. Well,
So, and then
Right
let's
in
see,
March.
this Wednesday the 17th is already taken up, and
Yeah.
so is Wednesday the 31st.
Do you want to, you want me to unshare? Are you ready to share yours?
Yeah, I could share either or.
Because you probably have a couple of changes on it already.
That's true. But you know, we can push the story of redemption off too. It doesn't have to, because yours will be corresponding with Jackie's revolutions at the same time. So if you wanted to do it Wednesday, March the 17th or the 24th, that's fine also. If you feel like you could have it done by then, you tell me when
24th,
you would prefer
this
to do it.
month?
Yeah, it's up to you. When do you want to do it?
I don't know if I'd rather shoot for like the 7th of April, maybe.
Okay, all right, that sounds good.
That gives me some leeway because I got to leave town here for a while and
Okay.
it's a mess again. Okay.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. And that was, do you remember the title of that? It's
Revolution.
okay. I'll get it. I'll get it. Revolutions. Okay. All right.
Okay.
Perfect.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Yeah, thank you. And then we'll put Jackie down for Brazil revolutions. I'm
That
not
was
sure.
2019, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Oops. I And I know there's 4 of them. I don't know how many days that'll take. So should I just go ahead and put you down for 4 Fridays?
Well, not unless we can do two Fridays, if we can, if they're not that long.
I'm trying
Yeah.
to remember. I think a couple of them might have been short,
Okay.
but we can look at it.
Maybe 2 Fridays then, but
We can look at it between.
we can adjust that,
Yeah.
if it looks like it's going to be longer.
Yeah. Sounds good. Cool. All right. Sounds good. All right.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone.
Well, thank you.
Always a blessing to be here with you.
Yes, you too.
Thanks. Sister Jackie, would you like to pray?
Sure. Our dear Father in heaven, we come to you now to close our study, and thank you for being with us as we've reviewed these thoughts from A.T. Jones and how much was going on in that time back in the late 1800s. Yes, it's so good for us to see this and review it and know what we will be coming up against in the not too distant future. We thank you that your spirit is guided, and thank you for each one of us that have been here tonight, that each one participated. And guide us, Father, in these studies and the thoughts that we've shared together tonight, with how it looks on the schedule, on the scheduling with the studies, and where they will fit in to the lines, and especially for our time that we're living in, how everything connects together. And this is such good practice for us as teachers. Thank you that you give us courage to step forward and learn and share and learn together. And we know that we can do nothing without you, and that everything that we know and all that we are is from you. And we give you all the praise. Thank you that we can join together on this first part of the week and be strengthened as we go into the rest of the week. Be with each one, be with all of our members who are not with us, and our teachers, our elders, and bless each one. And give us a good night's rest tonight. And again, we thank you for all that you're doing, how you're leading us and preparing us for what is coming with Panium. And I thank you for this, Father. And we pray all these things in Jesus' name, Yeshua's name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.